Imagine you are watching the greatest football match of your life. The final of a World Cup. 90,000 people in the stands screaming themselves hoarse. And then, in a single instant, a moment lasting less than a second, the history of world football is rewritten forever. And to this day, nearly 60 years later, no one has been able to prove with absolute certainty what really happened. Welcome to football's greatest mystery. And today, you are finally going to understand why England lifted the most famous trophy in the world with a goal that perhaps never existed. It was the 30th of July, 1966. Wembley Stadium in London was packed with a crowd that could barely contain itself. England, playing on home soil, faced West Germany in the World Cup final. The atmosphere was electric, charged with a tension that few sporting events are capable of generating. This was not merely a football match. It was a battle between two nations that, just 21 years earlier, had stood on opposite sides of one of the most devastating wars in human history. Every supporter in the stands knew it. Every player on the pitch felt it. But football, as always, had its own plans. The game started disastrously for the English. After just 12 minutes, Helmut Haller opened the scoring for the Germans. The silence that fell over Wembley lasted exactly 6 minutes, until Geoff Hurst, a centre-forward few had expected to make the final squad, equalised with a precise header. Martin Peters made it 2-1 in the 78th minute, and it seemed England were about to deliver what their supporters had dreamed of for so long. And it was precisely within those 30 minutes that the moment the world still debates took place. 12 minutes into extra time, Geoff Hurst received the ball inside the German penalty area, turned his body and struck powerfully at goal. The ball crashed against the crossbar, bounced down towards the goal line, and came back out onto the pitch. But did it cross the line or not? That is the question that has generated decades of studies, arguments, computer simulations, and disputes among football historians. At the exact moment of the shot, referee Dienst was too far away to be certain. The German players screamed that it had not gone in. The English celebrated as though it had. The Wembley crowd held its breath. Dienst then did something that changed the history of sport. He consulted his assistant, the Soviet linesman Tofik Bakramov. And here lies the detail that very few people know. Tofik Bakramov, born in Azerbaijan, which was part of the Soviet Union at the time, was positioned on the touchline, not on the goal line. His view of the incident, according to experts in football physics and geometry, was geometrically impossible to be conclusive from where he was standing. He simply could not have seen with certainty whether the ball had completely crossed the line. But he signalled, goal. And with that gesture from a man who perhaps could not have seen what he claimed to have seen, history was sealed. England defeated West Germany 4-2. Geoff Hurst became the only player ever to score a hat-trick in a World Cup final. And Captain Bobby Moore lifted the Jules Rimet trophy to applause that echoed around the world. But the story does not end there. In fact, it only becomes more intriguing from this point. In the decades that followed, as technology advanced, engineers at the University of Oxford used mathematical models and computer simulations to analyze the available footage of the incident. The result was devastating for the English. According to the researchers' calculations, the ball had not completely crossed the goal line. The rear of the ball had apparently touched the line, but not fully crossed it. Technically, by the laws of football, it was not a goal. FIFA's response was silence. The title had already been awarded. History had already been written. And there is another fascinating detail that most people outside England are entirely unaware of. Brazil, the reigning double world champions of 1958 and 1962, had been eliminated in the group stage of that 1966 World Cup, victims of an unprecedented brutality. Pelé, the greatest player in the world, was literally destroyed by opponents with criminal challenges that referees simply ignored. The maestro left the pitch in tears and vowed he would never play in another World Cup again. FIFA barely handed out punishments. That World Cup proved to be a watershed moment for the introduction of stricter rules to protect players, but the damage had already been done. While Brazil left shattered and humiliated, North Korea, in one of the greatest upsets in World Cup history, eliminated the mighty Italy in the group stage with a 1-0 victory, causing one of the most embarrassing results in European football. The Italian players were greeted at the airport back home with rotten tomatoes thrown by their own supporters. A tournament of contrasts, of surprises, of injustices, and of moments that time cannot erase. And returning to the center of everything, the match that would decide the world champions, referee Bakramov carried until the end of his life the responsibility of having made one of the most contested decisions in the history of sport. When asked, in his final years, how he had been so certain the goal was valid, he is reported to have replied with just one word: Stalingrad. A reference to the Soviet sacrifices during the Second World War. An answer that was never fully explained, that generated interpretations and theories of every conceivable kind, and that made the man even more enigmatic than the incident he had officiated. Azerbaijan, Bakramov's home country, honored him in a permanent way. The national stadium of the country bears his name to this day, the Tofik Bakramov Stadium in Baku. A monument to a man who made a split-second decision, or who perhaps simply believed he had seen what everyone around him wanted him to have seen. And what of Jeff Hurst? The man who scored the most controversial goal in history. The only hat-trick in a World Cup final. Hurst was awarded the title of Sir by Queen Elizabeth II. He became a national icon. His boot from that match is on display in museums. And he, to this day, well into his 80s, insists it went in. He saw the ball cross the line. He was there. And few people have the nerve to look Sir Jeff Hurst in the eye and tell him he is wrong. But physics does not care for knighthoods. In 1996, to mark 30 years since England's triumph, Adidas released a commemorative ball called the Wembley goal, and the debate resurged with full force across the pages of European newspapers. Then, in 2010, almost like one of football's cosmic ironies, Germany found themselves in a remarkably similar situation. At the World Cup in South Africa, in the round of 16 against England, Frank Lampard unleashed a thunderbolt that struck the crossbar and bounced clearly inside the German goal. The referee did not award it. England lost the match 4-1. The Germans, who for decades had insisted that the 1966 goal had never crossed the line, were now the beneficiaries of a comparable injustice. Football, with its poetic cruelty and unique sense of humor, had collected a debt. That 2010 episode proved decisive in FIFA finally adopting goal line technology in official competitions. The goal control system, and later Hawkeye, were introduced precisely to ensure that human decisions, mistaken or otherwise, would never again determine world titles. But the goal of 1966 will remain in limbo forever. No definitive answer. No absolution. No condemnation. England holds its only World Cup with pride and with that shadow of doubt that never entirely disappears. Germany carries the memory of what might have been a sixth title had that moment been judged differently. And football, in all its imperfection and humanity, continues to be the sport that produces the most unforgettable stories. Because in football, sometimes the difference between champion and runner-up is a ball that bounced off the crossbar, a linesman who perhaps could not see what he claimed to have seen, and a single enigmatic word murmured by an aging Azerbaijani referee who took his secrets to the grave. So tell me, do you think the goal went in or not? Leave your answer here in the comments, and don't forget to say which city and country you're watching from. I genuinely love knowing where each person who follows this channel comes from. If this story left you with that feeling that football is truly something beyond a simple game, leave a like to help this content reach more people, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next episodes. New people are arriving here every day, and every story we tell is more remarkable than the last. Oh, and one thing before you go, while doing some research online, I came across a product I thought was absolutely brilliant for anyone who loves football and nostalgia the way I do. I'm not here to push anything on you, but it was interesting enough that I decided to leave the link in the first pinned comment down below, just as a curious little tip. Have a look when you get a moment, I think you might enjoy it. And finally, what you've just seen today is only the tip of the iceberg. There are stories buried within world football that will make the 1966 goal look like a simple training session drill. We are researching, digging through archives, speaking to people who were there. Before long, one of those stories will arrive here. And when it does, you'll be glad you subscribed beforehand.